Welcome to Living Free in Tennessee, where we talk about building the life you choose on your terms. Today is Monday, August 12th, 2024, and this is episode 937 of Living Free in Tennessee. And you may have noticed I took last week off. It was not really my choice, but I got hit by the grip or the flu or I don't know what, but it was probably worse than most things I've had since the inception of this podcast. So I don't usually miss shows when I'm sick unless I can't talk. And then it's usually one show and I'm back on my feet. And I don't know. I was not back on my feet last week. Anyway, today we're going to talk about things you can do now to get ready for winter, which is coming. Winter is always coming on a homestead. Have you ever noticed that? Like winter is just over and we're like, let's get firewood. Anyway, also going to talk about the latest news from the Prepper Pantry, the weekly shopping report. I do not have a frugality tip today, so if you sent one in and I have not played it, resend it because for some reason it's not in my folder. And if not, get your frugality tips in and you can get on the show very quickly. Also, we're going to go over Operation Independence. Before we jump into that, though, I am going to talk about the featured event of today's show, and it is a rabbit processing, preserving, and potluck put on by one of our listeners, Amy, and this is in Alabama. If you want to check it out, go to livingfreeintennessee.com. In fact, I'm going to go there right now for those of you who are on the video, so you can see how to find these things on the website. So it's at livingfreeintennessee.com, and then if you scroll down the website on the right-hand side, you'll see this area that says webinars and events. And whenever I'm talking about go to the website to see stuff, that's where they are. And that's a combination of events that I put on and other people from the network put on. In fact, if you want to get your event in, you can see all the events that are in the hopper right now. And there's a button here. Wait, where is the button? I don't see the button right now. Usually there's a button that says submit your event, but it does not say it. Oh, fill out this form. Here it is. Submit your event for consideration. Fill out this form right there at the top. That's how you get in there. Anyway, go there. That's the rabbit processing, preserving potluck. And if you click on it, it gives you all of the information. It's in Brownsboro, Alabama, August 17th, 11 to 1 p.m. There is a fee if you are not part of the Southern United Rabbit Fanatics Club, but it's only $10 and you can see how to preservation methods, and try some really tasty dishes. So check that one out, livingfreeintennessee.com. I also want to thank our two sponsors of today's show. The first sponsor is this. I was going to do Discount Mylar Bags, even though that's not who's up today. So they just got a free plug. Anyway, our first sponsor of today's show is Agris Tax Advice, agristaxadvice.com. This is a business idea put together by Matthew Sursley, who is a member of our community. Many of you have met him in person if you've been to any of the events. He's been to Self-Reliance Festival. He's been to my spring workshop. So really cool dude. And he has one of those minds where he's good at analyzing things and then remembering them. That's a key detail. He's a lawyer. And he's also done a lot with tax law. He has real estate. He does a bunch of things. He has personal injury law. And what he does is he works with you to analyze how you're structured right now with whatever you're doing. This works best if you have a business, by the way, guys. And then he looks at that, helps you find tax write-offs that you may not be tracking that you can track, talks to you about how to track them, looks at your overall business structure. Like, this is the person to talk to if you're like, how do I structure this? But better than that, he can also go through and help you figure out the best way to take advantage of the tax code so that you keep more of your money in your pocket. Check out more at agristaxadvice.com. Thanks for the kind words in the comments, guys. I am feeling better, but I am not better. So this one's really hanging on. That's all I can say. It's kicked my butt. 100%. But I can do a show and I'm not contagious through the computer, right? That's the way that is. Our second sponsor of today's show is EMP Shield, empshield.com. They make a device that protects your whole house or whole car or whole whatever from surges and other things that can happen. Check it out at empshield.com. We just put one in here a couple weeks ago. I guess it was a week right before I got sick, as a matter of fact. We put an EMP shield in on my home because I'm terrified that we are going to get hit by lightning and it's going to come through my system and blow everything up. Well, now I've got an EMP shield device in and it will blow that up instead. And that's the whole goal. Very easy installation. My electrician friend put it in for me. And he was really impressed after reading about how the device works and all about it. Uh, he's been a little skeptical of EMP shield. We'll just put it that way. And that's because he's like, okay, so an EMP hits and then your device works, but there's no power anyway. So why does it matter? Well, then he realized the kind of protection it gives you for other electrical issues that can happen, like lightning striking or other surges that happen. And I don't know about you, but in our area, the power grid has been way less stable in the last 5 years or so. You can check out more about their device at empshield.com. If you want to get one, you can get $50 off with the coupon code LFTN. And I was reading the warranty because I just happened to have it in my hands. And I realized that, so here's what happens if for some reason you need a device. It sacrifices itself so that your fridge and your TV and whatever else is in your house don't get blown up. And if it fails, then they have a $25,000 warranty to replace stuff that got damaged, which is pretty darn cool, first of all. Secondly, if it sacrifices itself and you send the broken one back into them, you can actually replace it for $50, which I did not realize. So that's pretty cool. I guess that's how they get what they call their wall of fame at the factory, where they have all these devices that have protected people up on this wall on their factory. And I think that's a really great add-on that I didn't realize they have. So check it out if you're in the market for one of those, empshield.com. Use coupon code LFTN if you want to get a discount. This week we're gonna stick to our live stream schedule, even though I'm not all the way better. Tomorrow at 12:30 p.m. Central, I will be on with Backwoods Butcher and Sean Mills for a new format for our Tuesday live show. So you'll check that. You'll see all about it tomorrow, 12:30. And then Friday at 9:30 in the morning, Central Standard Time, Homestead Happenings with Tactical Redneck. And we will be going over some things like we had a very eventful week last week, even though I was sort of out of it. And I was a little sad that we didn't get to do Homestead Happenings Friday because I was like, there's all this stuff that happened on the homestead that would be really interesting to talk about, except for I'm not talking right now. So we're going to have like a double duty on Friday. It's possible that show will go a little bit long. Okay, with that, it's time for our first segment of today's show, Tales from the Prepper Pantry. You can tell I'm not right? Like I keep saying weird words. Tales from the Prepper Pantry, where we talk about storing what you use and using what you store. And I've got some canning goals that are a little harder to reach this year than usual because of what's happened with the garden this year. But I've been doing my best to source things locally from people I know. And the cool thing is that I know a lot of people in my area. I've been here 17 years. And, when you have a passion like homesteading and gardening, you get to know other people who have the same passion in your area. Plus, I used to sell at the farmer's market. So because I spent time there, I got more hooked into that community. And they've been saving my butt this year. So I bought a lot of tomatoes from somebody who lives, I don't know, 5 miles from me, I think, not too far. And every time he has had extra tomatoes that I could do something with them, I have purchased them from him. And if I couldn't do something from them right then, the cool thing about preserving tomatoes is you can just toss them in the freezer and deal with them later. And I've done that for sure. Especially like I got a box of tomatoes last Saturday, not the one we just had, but the one before. I also got 6 Saturday night, like the beginning of this whole episode of my life started that night. And there was a box of tomatoes I had just sourced from him that day. So Sunday, Monday, I was completely out of it. But I think I had one window where I was up for 5 minutes or 10 minutes. And that whole box just went like loop straight into the freezer. So those actually did get processed into sauce later already. But yeah, it's happening. So the canning goals have been more of a challenge because I'm not just like canning as I go out of my garden. What's happening is I'm doing what I call a preserve blitz, or I'm getting everything at one time and then need to do something with it. So I do my best to time those times for when things are lighter workload around here. And I've been super lucky that one of my friends from the farmers market, another organic gardener, has had 3 bushels of green beans available this year, which he doesn't usually have. I mean, like, he's not growing for other people. It's just he had a really good green bean year. And if you contrast that here locally, most people have had kind of sucky green bean years. And it's because we got the oven earlier than usual for about 2 straight weeks, and the plants didn't like it very much. There is a flush of green beans coming on for people now, so that's kinda cool, but that's come together for me really well, and my goal is to put up 60 jars of green beans a year just for our use here, and the Duke of Permaculture is in the house. Hello. Yeah, getting ready for winter. Learn about rocket mass heaters. Absolutely, those things are badass. Um, Anyway, so I had 38 or 39 jars put up already at this point, and another bushel landed in my lap today. So I expect to have another 20 jars or so from that. This morning I was doing a combination of roasting coffee and canning green beans, and I put up already, let's say 7. I put 11 jars already at this point. So hopefully this evening we'll do the final push. I'll make my goal of 60. Ooh, and then we won't have to be doing any more green bean canning. And then from there, it's just salsa and tomatoes in the canning department. I've got plenty of pickles left from last year. I've got plenty of relish left from last year. I've got plenty of pickled okra and pickled beets left from last year. So those things, if I come across them, then great. My beets didn't do much this year, so I didn't worry about it too much. So that's coming together. I'm relieved about it because I wasn't sure we were going to make it on the whole canned good things. And then I was just like, well, I guess I will just double down on growing winter lettuce this year if that happens, because what I don't really like to do is buy things out of season that we shipped up from South America. That's not really my thing. I prefer to stay local as well. Paul's asking, any food dehydrating? I do dehydrate food mostly, and this is the funny part because I live in a very humid environment. I don't use a dehydrator. I hang it in my kitchen in bundles because most of what I'm dehydrating are more of the aromatics and the herbs and the medicinals. So I have a bunch of goldenrod right now that we are drying for the winter. I have chocolate mint. And this week, I will be going around and dealing with like all of the sage herb, some of the basil herb. We've got passion flower going nuts in the pasture. So I'm going to get some of those leaves going. And then I've already got my red clover for the year. And I'm probably going to get some blackberry root because I've been diving into that, as well as mullein. The thing about mullein is I dry mullein like one mason jar for us at a time, because that plant here, it's just there all the time. But if you're like super sick, then it's really nice to have some in the house that you don't have to walk outside to go get some, although it's probably good for you to walk outside. I'm not planning to dehydrate any. I might dehydrate some of my garlic. We'll see. I think my garlic crop was enough this year, but usually it's much more abundant, and then I end up putting some of that up and making garlic powder. As I like the key to homemade garlic powder, guys, is you dry the garlic, and I grind it up before I dry it. Like I dice it, finely dice it before I dry it, and then I grind it into a powder as I need it. Because if you grind it into a powder before you need it and don't add like an anti-clumping agent of some sort, it will clump. Well, I don't want an anti-clumping agent in my spices, so I just grind it as I go. And homemade garlic powder is a whole different league from stuff you get at the store. So that's my thoughts on all of that. Okay. As I said, I was sick this week, and sick food worked out really well because on Saturday I hosted a barbecue and I made a really big pork butt on the smoker. And I didn't eat very much that day, and I stopped eating after that day for days. But there's another person who lives on the homestead, and he eats enough for 2 to 3 people. And so when I went down, like I was sort of not feeling great Saturday. So I just like, I ate some at the barbecue. And then like after everybody else left, I started feeling bad. And the way I felt bad was just that like my spine hurt and I wasn't hungry. I was like, well, if you're not hungry, don't eat, right? Like that's your body telling you not to eat. Well, Sunday then my spine hurt more. So I went to the lake and I swam thinking like if I get some exercise, it'll like get the kinks out and I'll feel better. And that's the thing about when you're sick. Exercise either helps you kick it or it's like, okay, now you're really sick. So I got home from that. I went to bed and I didn't come out of bed for days. Um, the good news was there was a big pork butt already cooked. So the redneck had food while I was down and I wasn't eating anything until I think Wednesday or Thursday that I started eating again. So usually I have some stuff put aside for sick food that's like easy to heat, like soup and other things, because when you're down, you're not like, okay, let's go process the chicken and put it in a crock pot and make some chicken stew. And like sometime tomorrow I'll have food. Yeah. Like you got to have some stuff that's ready to go. And in this case, I didn't need it. What I needed was tea and what I got was tea. So that worked really well. And then getting back on the wagon, man, that has not been easy because I'm such a ketogenic eater and nothing ketogenic has sounded good to me since, I mean, like now it is again. So I'm back. Like tonight we're having steak for dinner. Super simple. But like there was a period of time in there where I actually, so I keep sugar on hand, not because I eat sugar, because I don't eat sugar. Sugar is one of the foods I've cut from my life. Um, and I have it for the hummingbirds though, because they like sugar water. We put sugar water out for them. So I had milk, I had eggs, and I had sugar. And I was like, you know what I really want is ice cream, because when I was growing up, the recovery food was ice cream. That was one of the ones. So what I'm going to make is custard, and I made a vanilla custard and then added some chocolate powder, like just cocoa powder to it. And that worked pretty well. It wasn't ice cream, but it was fine. And it was just because I had sugar for the hummingbirds that I was able to put that together. So that is not a Doc Berry approved recovery food, but I totally did have some of that. And if you've never made custard, it's interesting because I believe that's also my recipe of the week this week. What you do is you beat the egg yolks, you separate them from the whites, and you beat them with whatever sugar you're going to add. You don't actually have to add sugar. And actually, to make this a keto friendly thing, you would just do it without sugar. I might try that next week just to try it. And then you mix it. You also heat milk or heavy cream on the stove. And that's where like the carbs come in if you're worried about carbs. Like the milk has carbs, the egg yolks have some carbs. So you beat the egg yolks while the milk is heating, and I don't actually heat it to a certain temperature. It's just like when it's hot, I drizzle while beating the eggs or whisking the eggs. I drizzle some of the milk in. The amount of milk that I heated for 3 egg yolks was, let's see, a cup and a quarter, or maybe it was a cup and a half, somewhere around there. As you can tell, it's a very scientific, very precise recipe as usual. So I drizzled some in until about a half cup of it had been thoroughly mixed. And the key is with the beaten eggs to keep them moving. And then it becomes more liquidy. And then you whisk the milk that's on the stove and you pour that in and mix it really well. And then while whisking, not like hardcore whisking, but while stirring regularly with the whisk, you heat it until it's done. And the way you know it's done is it goes from a liquid consistency to it like pudding kind of coats your whisk. You can move to I usually move to a spatula, like a rubber spatula that's able to scrape a little bit by the end. And then you pour it into forms, put it in the fridge, and let it chill out. So that works pretty well. And it's very easy to make, and it doesn't have any flour in it if you're trying to avoid grain. Paul says, when feeling wonky, I drink ginger juice with some hot water and stevia. Yep. I don't do stevia, but ginger, like a ginger tea is one of my go-tos if I have upper respiratory in particular. But I bet on a sort of a figgly stomach, that would have felt good. I didn't even think about ginger. All I thought about was peppermint and my peppermint tea with mullein was what I was craving. And then I think Tactical at some point added a Mexican something. Not cardamom, it was what's that yellow herb that's from India that I can't remember the name of right now? Turmeric, Mexican turmeric is what he called it. I don't know. It was actually it made the tea really good, and now I have to order some of that. So that's happening. Okay, the next like big update from the Prepper Pantry. So my Prepper Pantry is in a separate entrance part, but it's connected to the house. And in there, it's like it used to be a garage, but it was never a garage where you could park something. It's actually not big enough to, you could put a four-wheeler in there, but you couldn't put a car in there unless it was like a tiny little smart car or something. When I moved in, it had a wood burning water heater, it had a boiler system, it had the water heater, and it had a commercial smelting factory generator, and none of it worked. So, well, the hot water heater worked. So over the years, eventually all of that stuff got taken out of there. I hemmed and hawed about the wood burning water heater, but I just decided I wasn't ever going to use it. And then I talked to somebody who knew the guy who built this place, and he's like, yeah, he went through cords of wood every winter using that thing to heat water, to try to heat the house by circulating water under the floor. And I am not sure that if that's really true now. Like that may be fiction, but it was like he had boiler parts on it, so he may have been doing some sort of boiler system, or it may have been circulating differently than the people told me, because I've actually pulled the whole floor out now, and I did not find pipes under there. So unless they were buried further down, they were not there. But he totally had the wood burning water heater. So some of that stuff got sold, some of it got scrapped that was scrappable. And it was it was a big effort. Like if you've ever been to the holler and you see like the black top is all bowed up in this one place where we serve our food in the outdoor kitchen, and we're always like strategically putting a serving table over it. That's because some of the stuff we pulled out of there was so heavy that when we loaded it on the trailer to take it away, it like literally sank into the blacktop that was already there. So that's all gone. So then what I had was a cinder block room below grade that I've used as a storage area and root cellar ever since. And so does it work as well as a real root cellar built into the ground? No. Does it work better than throwing stuff under my bed at preserving root vegetables? Yes. So I've always put like potatoes and squash and stuff in there. And then it's decent enough as far as protection from the elements that I've also, stored other extra things. It's why we call it the Prepper Pantry. Like it's got food, it's got freezers now, it's got all sorts of different things. And the thing is, when I moved in, there was tar paper on the roof, but not roof on the roof, so to speak. And then eventually I put a roof on as best I could over the top of the tar papery thing. And it mostly keeps it dry in there. But what we decided to do a while ago is rip that whole roof off, all of it, the plaster, the metal cross supports that are made out of pipe, the meshy stuff that's there, the weird foam insulation, the one layer of metal roof, the layer of concrete on top of that, the second layer of metal roof, and then the 2x4 frame, and then the metal roof on top of that. Anybody who's in building right now just heard me explain that, and they're like, what? Wait, what? Yeah. So everybody who's ever bid on working on my roof without listening to me has been really mad when they get into the project and discover that there's concrete between two layers of metal roof on my roof. And I have no plans of taking that all off on the whole house, but in that one section we did. And so basically the roof is torn out. That's what's happening. The Prepper Pantry still has that outer metal roof on 2x4 framing kind of hanging in there so that if it rains before the roofer comes, it's okay. But our friend Ken Esch is coming out this week to frame it properly, make it properly, tie it into the existing roof, and then we'll go back inside to the prepper pantry, which everything's out of it now except for the freezers at this time. And I think we're going to recoat the floor with some concrete and make sure that it's watertight from the ground because this is built into the side of the hill. Um, Maybe reconfigure where the water services are a little bit and reorganize in there, and then do a more like all of the proper insulating and sealing stuff so that rodents don't get in there, so that the whole thing, and painting and like all of the things that need to be done in there, so that going into winter it's not sort of, it's always been a little makeshift. Like I hold it together, but Hogs 14 says that's a great song. Yep, I it's like every time I talk about roofs, I'm like the roof, the roof is on fire. Like literally, there are songs going through my head all the time. That's what's going on in there. So, so that's happening. So what that means is that the prepper pantry is not available to store prepper pantry things, and I'm expecting it will be well after the festival in October that that room is all the way ready already with proper wiring and all of that stuff for me to move the things back in. And that means I'm keeping a smaller cushion of things that I buy at the store, which anyway, since changing how we eat here like dramatically, there's hardly anything that I get. The only things I'm really getting at the store at this point, besides chocolate, is when I want a specific Asian kind of sauce that we don't make here. And um yeah, that's pretty much it. And I have some canned goods, but I haven't really used my canned, like I have canned goods from 2022 that haven't been used. And I think because they're not expired yet, it's a high likelihood they will be donated to a food bank before they expire. So people who want, because we're just not getting into those at all. It's all home canned, it's all homegrown. And that's been a transition that took decades to make. So, like people new to the podcast, when you hear that, it doesn't mean like you start homesteading and next year you don't go to the store. Some people always stay going to the store. What's happened here over time is um, what we eat has changed a lot. And then also it's just easier and better. Like it tastes better to do it from scratch as much as possible. And then there are things I don't like doing from scratch. So then those things tend to come from the store, like mayonnaise. Although I made mayonnaise a week, 2 weeks ago, and um, I may make mayonnaise for a while because the problem with store mayonnaise is it has other things in it besides eggs and oil and spices and lemon or vinegar. Like it's kind of like back to that pudding recipe, right? Like mayonnaise doesn't need to have a bunch of weird stuff in it. It's just like an acid and a fat and an egg yolk and some spices, and that's mayonnaise. And unfortunately, it's hard to find that kind of mayonnaise. Although I went down the rabbit trail of, I was trying to decide, like, there's an official word on how long you're supposed to keep your homemade mayonnaise. But I was trying to like figure out, like, yeah, but really, how long does mayonnaise really last from a food safety standpoint? Like, why is it 1 week versus 3 weeks or whatever? And why does the store mayonnaise last longer? Even the ones that are like not full of a bunch of stuff. So yeah, Paul says there's no commercial mayo that's organic and made with good oil. There's one that I found that I haven't really gone down the rabbit trail of that's made out of avocado oil. That's $16 for a tiny little jar that might have good oil in it. I don't know. I am actually moving towards making it with melted tallow and animal fats. But I used actually an oil on this one because it was totally worth I wanted good ingredients basically. And Paul's right. It's really hard to find anything. So I went down this whole rabbit trail and they're like, well, commercial mayonnaise you can just leave out at room temperature and blah, 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 because the problem with most food poisoning related to mayonnaise isn't the mayonnaise, it's the other food that it's on. So, like on potatoes and sat out at room temperature where the bacteria has been introduced is from the potatoes. And that can lead to all sorts of things. So, then they also recommend that you pasteurize your egg yolks before using them, which I did not do because I was just like, I'm not going to do it. It's like not how you make mayonnaise. But anyway, I mean, I guess you could, but I don't. And every recipe I've ever done with mayonnaise is like, and leave it at room temperature for 45 minutes so the acid from the lemon juice or the vinegar has a chance, if there's any bacteria in there, to kill it before you put it in the fridge. Those are the recipes I always see. Well, that's totally been erased from the entire like knowledge base of mayonnaise. So anyway, I I made mayonnaise and now I don't need to buy it again. So now we're going to play with like bacon grease and tallow and all of because most of the oils we use here are not seed oils of any kind or plant oils. They are all fats from, like keeping all of the things that we cook from the animals that we process. So there we go. So the roof is being redone and we're keeping less stuff. And then I'm realizing I don't need to replenish most of it. So there's that. This time of year, what we're doing as far as collection is it's like herbal remedy week in the holler. Elderberries are ripe. And so I was at a friend's house and he had a huge elderberry plant. And so I harvested elderberries from there instead of here, even though I have them here because his were easier to get to than mine. And then I put them in like a big old bag in my freezer when I got home. And I will take, you can get these combs, like wide tooth combs at the store. I'll just comb them when it's frozen to take the berries off. That's my favorite way of harvesting them. You can also beat them on the side of a bucket and they'll fall off. Then the goldenrod, passion flower, mint, and mullein are all coming on strong. So I've been a little slow to harvest it, but yeah, I'm kind of doing one at a time. Right now we are goldenrod rich, which is great because another friend of mine, Amanda, does not have much coming off her property, so she'll get some from here. But we are just seeing all sorts of goldenrod everywhere, all over the place. And then the passion flower, like those vines last well into the fall. It'll go from flower to fruit soon. And then the mint also, it's blooming. It's blooming mint. So I'm going to cut the blooms off and let it regenerate and harvest. The creek mint is like huge right this year. So I'll probably get a bunch of that. Some of that I'll hang to dry outside under the like covered area where the outdoor kitchen is, just so that it's not all over the place. I have the best dill harvest I've ever had, and that one I didn't grow. I got it from Dawn. So you guys hear like where I'm sourcing stuff, right? Like some of it's here, some of it's from the community. And that's why it's important to know the people who you get along with in the homesteading community around you, because Dawn had a hillside of dill this year. That's something I've always wanted in my life, is a hillside of dill. Never gotten it, but I've always wanted it. And I was like, sweet. And so she's like, come get whatever you want. I was like, I'm going to have all the dill for all the pickles for years to come, because you can dry that stuff and it lasts a long time. We're doing a deep freezer audit. I have one more freezer plugged in than I need to have plugged in at the moment. So I know that. And I know that simply by going through and looking at what's in there and reorganizing it, that will take at least one, maybe two out. I mean, if I do it right, because then there's like the whole section of the freezer that my friend uses for her part of the cow that we share. If I do it right and I'm like, hey, do you need some ground and steaks? I might be able to get down to just 2 deep freezers. So that'll be nice if that happens. And then once that prepper pantry piece is done, like we had a big old conversation today about a walk-in and building a walk-in, and if we're doing it in the prepper pantry, and the answer was no, we're going to do it right next to the prepper pantry. Once that's done, we then go back into finishing the mudroom. So I have a room that you walk through to get into the house where the laundry machine is. And I have like food preservation preparation areas. So there's like a vacuum sealer in there and some other stuff. And I want to reconfigure the whole thing and make it so that if there is a thing that plugs in, there's a place for the thing that plugs in with a plug. Yeah, it's a shocking concept. And that it's organized in a way where it can do, there are three functions of this room. One is helping alleviate the pressure on the kitchen from food preservation, right? So that the kitchen can also be used to cook in. I do the outside kitchen for food preservation too, but I like to handle the food inside the house because it's cooler inside my house than outside my house. And then that just makes it better from a food lasting standpoint. And it's a mud room, so like you change your clothes and hang your coats or whatever. And then it's also the laundry room. So and it's a small space. So it's going to be an interesting little challenge. Like, how do we fit everything in here in a way that doesn't require if you don't do it right, you end up with sort of like the layer of things where they go on the shelves, and then the layer in front of that on the floor getting in my way and aggravating me. So that's the thing that, yeah, that's going to be a lot of conversations and measuring. And do you really want this thing, or not? So, yeah. I mean, I don't use a mixer anymore, a stand mixer anymore. So that's gone. So at least I don't have to try to fit a KitchenAid in there. You know what I mean? Like, no KitchenAid in there. Because the KitchenAid gets used once a year for a week. And I found somebody who would take care of it for me the rest of the year, which I really appreciate. Anyway, that's what's going on. So there's a lot going on in the Prepper Pantry. Next up is the weekly shopping report. Here's what's up from Joe. Home Depot has increased the price of a 2x4x8 to $365. And then he went to Aldi. Staple prices are as follows. White bread is $135. Eggs are $225. Milk is $2.89, which is an increase in price. Heavy cream is $5.39. OJ is $3.45. Butter is $3.79. Bacon is $3.99. Potatoes $4.49. I feel like the potatoes should be coming down soon because I feel like the harvest should be coming on, and there should be like that initial fall glut of potatoes that come. Flour $2.35. 80% lean ground beef is $3.79. And then they went to Food City and we're able to source honey, like local Tennessee raw honey, $14.99 for, I think it's a quart jar. Yeah, quart jar. So a gallon of untainted regular gasoline is $3.59.9. Next up is the frugality tip section. And I just want to mention, if you have a frugality tip you want to share, email it to me, Nicole@livingfreeintennessee.com. I've been in a big old argument on TikTok with somebody about growing food and how much it costs. And you're welcome to go check that out. It all started with a friend of mine posting about, like gardening. And they were like, yes, but blah, 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 expensive. And I was like, well, actually, it doesn't cost that much if you save your seeds to grow more vegetables the next year. And they've been up my face about it because apparently you can't frugally garden. And it did boil down to, I have white privilege because I'm able to source free wood, according to them. And I was like, why do you need wood to grow tomatoes? Like, you could just like dig a hole in the ground and put a tomato in the hole. But, that's been going on. So my frugality tip related to that is find ways to grow vegetables and save your seeds. And then it's like printing money, because then the plants you get next year didn't cost you money. So we've talked about that a lot. There's a lot of scuttlebutt about tomatoes being really extra expensive to raise at home. And they always bring in like, it costs this much to make a raised bed, which you don't have to do. It costs this much to buy the soil, which you don't have to do. It costs this much to buy the fertilizer, which you don't have to do. It costs this much to buy the plants that somebody else grew for you, which you don't have to do. Right? So not saying that's a bad way to go necessarily. Like, if you want to build a raised bed and buy your soil and buy your plants and set yourself up for success the first year, especially if you've never grown anything before, go for it. Like, it's your life. You get to have fun however you want. But all of those steps are unnecessary to growing things. So Paul Wheaton says apple seeds from store-bought apples. Yeah, free. You bought the apple to eat, and then you kept the seed, and it grew into a tree, and it grew a different kind of apple than the apple you ate. You got that seed, and you don't care because you have apples, or they taste terrible. Who knows? And then you have organic matter you can make into compost. Like there's all sorts of stuff. But yeah. Yeah, the Petricious Foreman says, "Oh no, this is a hill I will die on. There are ways to grow for free if you get a little creative." Yeah, and it's not white privilege to be able to source wood for free. Anybody of any skin tone color in my community, if somebody has free pallets, is more than welcome to grab those free pallets. And if you don't have a truck to put them in, carry one. They're heavy, but they're not that heavy. And if you have a car instead, like break it down on site and put it in your car. There's lots of different ways to do it. Like the wood they were talking about that they saw in the background in one of my videos was in my aquaponics system. And it was in fact pallet wood. And I did in fact get it for free. But it has nothing to do with my skin color. But they were just, like this isn't a lesson, guys. Don't argue with people on the internet. And actually the only reason I'm arguing with them at this point is because I get to say additional tips in this conversation chain of ways you can spend less money gardening. And so it's not really for them. It's for the people reading the chain who are entertained by it, who are like, oh, I hadn't thought of doing that. Or, oh, I never tried that before, right? Next up, Operation Independence, where we talk about building local ongoing revenue into our plants. Here's one. I've mentioned some deep freezers in today's show, and they are consumer grade deep freezers. And we are looking at laying plans to put a walk-in in freezer and fridge, like either convertible or two sides, so that we can hang our meat when we process it better. And also because I think we can spend less on power and also like lower risk of things breaking by building our own walk-in situation. So we're at the initial phases of that. And then I think it'll be easier to build custom storage area shelves for that than what's built into an actual square refrigerator you get from the store. So that's all happening. But that's not why you all came here, is it? Was it the main topic of today's show? Winter is coming. There's nothing better than winter when you're ready for it. As long as it's in short amounts. But are you ready for it? That's the question. Because right now it's hot. But even in Tennessee right now, there's a certain crispness in the air. Like humidity has dropped here. It's probably going to rise again when we get thunderstorms later this week. And there's a certain crispness in the evening air in particular. Like right now, this morning, I got up at 6 and I got a cup of coffee and I went outside and I sat facing the east as I do. And nobody else is up at that point at my house. Well, even the dogs slept in today, actually. So literally nobody else was up except for the cats. And it was just pleasant outside. It was a little cold. Like I even thought about might be almost hoodie weather in the morning. Like that's how cold it was. The past 2 nights, no air conditioning in my house, right? Just windows open, pleasant, natural breeze coming through. It was really great. And right now also, the garden's at peak production. Which is not the usual flush that we've had every year, as you all know. But even though all of that abundance is coming off the land right now, I'm already starting to think about winter months are coming. Also, Rachel would like to point out we are missing some likes, and you don't want to tick Rachel off at all. Just saying. So get your likes in if you want to keep the algorithms happy. The old timers are already talking about the hardest winter ever. Just so you know, I don't know if they're doing this in your area, but yeah, hardest winter ever. And, they base this on such scientific things as the caterpillars and other signs that we have. It hasn't been time to check out how the seeds are formed in the persimmons yet, but that's another one that we look at. Even the pawpaws are they're really close to being ripe. And usually they come on the second week of September here. But I'm starting to give them side eye. Are you going to be ready early this year? Because you kind of look like you might want to be ready early this year. And pawpaw season for me is super fun because Pawpaws are only good for like a week here. And so I get to have a pawpaw every day for that week, and then the pawpaws are gone for the year. And I don't try to preserve them. I just eat them. I think you can freeze them. And some people, if you dry them and then reconstitute them, it causes like explosive diarrhea. So just if you're gonna preserve pawpaws, just do a little research on ways to preserve them. But personally, I just eat them fresh, one a day or two a day when they come on off the trees, um, and they're delicious. They're like a banana meets a pear. So that's sort of a fun one. But then you'll also see like the coyote poop is full of pawpaw seeds. It's how we get more pawpaw trees around, right? The coyotes eat them and they walk around and they poop and they plant a pawpaw tree and then more pawpaw trees happen. So I didn't even know what a pawpaw was till I moved to Tennessee. And I was like, well, that's a very interesting fruit. I wish I would have like known about growing up, but there we go. So the old timers do this every year, by the way. They're like, it's gonna be the hardest winter ever. And then you'll go through a whole like I've gone through whole winters with no snow at all here. And I'm like, y'all said it would be a hard winter, and it was like beautiful in February. I should have been growing, beets in February. It was so nice. And then other years, it's like, oh, it's -5. They were kind of right. It's cold right now. I don't like -5 at all. So now is the time to get ready for winter. Not 2 days before the freeze is coming in or 4 days before the freeze is coming in. Right now. And I think really, if you think about summer on a homestead, that's what summer's all about. Summer is all about getting ready for winter. So if you're new to homesteading, we're going to talk about just what we're doing to get ready for the winter. But guys in the live stream, and if you want me to see it, put the first word or two in all caps because I don't always see, especially since I've gone to this new setup and my computer is really small right now. So there's that. Your words are tiny. What are you doing to get ready for winter? So for me, I start with the no-kill list at this time of year. And the no-kill list is what will die in winter if I don't make, certain accommodations for it. And I start with people because our first priority on the homestead is to keep the people alive. And what do people need? They need food, water, and shelter. So that's why I'm really concerned about those 60 quarts of green beans being canned, right? And then the tomatoes and all the other things. But what else do you need to keep people alive? It's going to be different for your area. Okay, then how do we keep the pets alive? For me, keeping the pets alive means having a certain amount of food on hand, making sure they have access to water, those sorts of things. And water ends up being here the primary concern of winter because on the homestead, we're producing food all summer long so that we have food in the winter. I need hay for the sheep really badly. Um, and it's it's more about like if they don't have water, they die. And if it gets cold, the water freezes. And unless you have access to a moving creek or something, you have to think about that. Whether it be burying a line somewhere, if you're going to just carry water, it depends on how much livestock you have. I know a lot of people move their livestock into a part of their property that has a natural water source of some sort, just so they can keep them going. And then once the pets are handled, we got the livestock. And livestock need to have had a good enough summer that they go into winter with good fat stores, depending on the kind of livestock. They need to have, like, their shelter needs to be worked out, all of those things. And then plants. So most of the plants here, I'm not really doing anything to get them through the winter because they go dormant for the winter. But can I give them a leg up? And I do have a couple specialty plants that I want to keep. Like, I'm not worried about keeping my tomatoes in the garden alive, right? They're just going to die. That's what they do. But I want to be ready to plant my garlic in October so that I have garlic again, as opposed to waiting till December like I did last year. And I have a banana plant. And the banana plant wants a little special handling to make it through the winter here so that it can come back next year in all of its banana glory. And my strawberries want me to separate them so they're not all on top of each other and they can make lots of berries. Uh, just, and the daughter plants are what I think make the more berries than the mother plants anyway. But when you're thinning them, it just sort of naturally, it does two things. One, my swales can then have more ground cover. And two, I make room for the fruit to come. And strawberries are one of the fruits I actually like producing on the homestead. So there you go. But that's like the no-kill list. And we will try to keep another rosemary plant alive this year. We've not had great luck with rosemary. I don't know if we have one left from last. So what happened this year is we overwintered rosemary by, like, we've been trying it in different microclimates on the property. Because what happens in Tennessee is it goes dormant and then it wakes up and then it gets cold and then it wakes up and then it gets cold and it wakes up, and eventually that back and forth really messes with it. So if you have it on like a west side of your house where there's sort of some heat radiating to the roots, that can really help it through. If you make it 5 or 6 years with one plant, it's just more ready to deal with the fact that things change. The weather changes. But this year, we had a couple plants doing really well that had made it through at least one winter and into the spring. No, they made it. Yeah. So one winter, the winter before, last winter, which was really cold, and then into the spring this year. And then the fire ants came and nuked them. They were like, this is a good place for an anthill. And it just nuked them. So, yeah, that's another thing on my no-kill list is do kill the fire ants. I don't like the fire ants. What I've heard is that as your soil gets healthier, fire ants are less interested in it. So I'm really interested in trying that out and seeing. And it is true. I don't have fire ants in my garden space. So, and that soil is in better shape than anywhere else on the property, I would say. But we've been really looking at ways to broadcast compost tea and other things around to try to get the rest of the soil happier on my property, especially after all the compacting we did when we reshaped the hillside last year. So that's the first place I start. And once I've figured out what has to happen, I look for weak areas. And every year the same weak area comes out, and that's keeping the water going. So what I've learned over the years, so my first winter here, in order to keep water to the chickens, I had a metal bucket with water. And I would bring it to the chickens in the morning, and I would take the frozen metal bucket of water and put it by my wood stove. And then, halfway through the day, I'd switch the buckets again when it was really cold. And the good news was it was never really cold like that. Since that time, I've learned that you can put heaters under them. You can bury things in the ground. You can give them access to the pond. Like my chickens and ducks have access to a pond that's spring fed that does not freeze. Like it'll get a little ice around the edges on when it's really cold, but they just have access to that natural water source. So then it's about keeping the sheep in water, and the sheep are harder because they do not have access to a natural water source all the time. There's only one part of their pasture that is a natural water source. And then other than that, we're breaking ice every morning for the sheep and like throwing you take the top layer off and then there's ice. What works best for us for that are those little rubber, like the round rubber waterers work really well. But if I wasn't rotating them the way we are, we could have stock tanks with stock tank heaters. And that's the other thing you can do is you can add a heater to the situation. When we had pigs, there was a stock tank heater in a 55-gallon barrel with a nipple on it that the pigs used, and that worked pretty well. I have a stock tank heater in my sump of my aquaponics system, so it keeps it 36 degrees in there. And then that water rotates through the system, so it's moving water, so that works. The rabbits, though, don't have a heater. And they've got I think it's a 3 or 4 gallon container with water in it that gravity feeds to them, and it's always moving. Like right now, it's always just moving because of how the gravity and the suction works, right? When it gets really cold, Tactical adds a pump to that system so it's rotating faster. And last year it did go through -5-degree nights and did not freeze, and we did not add a stock tank heater to it. So that's actually pretty cool. So just moving the water can make a huge difference. But if, like if this is your first year, really think about your water and what you want to try this year. Have your backup plan for if everything fails. And for me, the backup plan is hand carry water and change the water, which is not fun, but it keeps your animals alive long enough for you to figure out something else. And if you're going to buy something related to keeping your water freezing, source it now and buy it now, because by December, often those things are not in stock in different, like they run out. And if there's something hitting your particular area, then you will end up with a run on all that stuff and you're in trouble. And then think about ice and its accumulation in places that get wet. If you're in a cold area, cold environment, think about how you're going to control that ice. Here, I have a couple areas near the house where if it snows and gets icy, there can be some slickness. And so I just keep some clay cat litter on hand and I can throw it on that, and that's good enough. Some people use salt. I haven't had to here. And as long as that stays cat littered, it's fine. I do know when we get like large scale, for us, snow events, that we have a tendency to walk similar paths all the time. And in order to not fall on my ass, I walk different paths through the snow because it'll get all trampled down and then it becomes slick and then I move over a little bit. That's just what we do here. So those are all things. And then shelter is really important for your livestock in particular. And it can be important if you have certain plants that you like. I bring a plant in every year for the winter to overwinter on my windowsill. I left it there all summer. I just took cuttings off it this year to put outside, but it's the longevity spinach. And it does fine on my windowsill. And it overwinters there, and then I can bring it back. It practically propagates itself, really. So it does well outside. But those are the things I start with. Once I know that's handled, and once I've ordered anything I need to order, I think about how much food do I want to have on hand. It's not time in Tennessee to stock up on anything you're sourcing from off the homestead, by the way, because you have to store that stuff. And it's still going to be hot and humid here for a bit longer. But I want to be thinking about how much I'm going to store. Do I want like 4 months put up or what? It's really nice when things happen weather-wise and you're in a deep holler to not have to drive out of said deep holler to go get rabbit food. Right now, my fodder trees are ready for me to harvest more off of them. Like I could go through the fodder trees right now and get a bunch of stuff, pull the leaves off the branches, and put that up for the rabbits, for example. That would be really good use of my time, as a matter of fact. And then I don't have to buy as much rabbit feed. But having that properly handled for the winter is a very good thing. So then once that's done, what about illness? What if somebody gets sick in the winter? Are you ready for that? Because again, you may not be able to just drive to the store if there's an ice event. And in fact, I've had more than one occasion where ice storm struck and terrible illness struck, or ice storm was coming in and emergency room was needed. And then I had to get home from the emergency room in the ice storm. But being able to deal with some basic things is pretty important. So right now is a really good time to look at, like, do I have everything I need for if somebody gets sick? Or are there things where I'm like, oh, I would just run to the store and get X? Whatever X is, think about how many of those X's you need for your winter stores and get them done, and look at what you have now so that you have room for the things you need, and then think about how they're organized. I have become keenly aware that the way mine are organized right now work really well for me, but when other people need to find things in my stores, they don't find them. So I am changing how that's done. I'm going to get more. So I have big bins of stuff and I know what's in the bins and I know approximately where in the bin they are. I'm the only one who does. So I'm getting smaller bins that are topically organized, gonna label them so people know what to, like the Band-Aids are there and the whatever is here. And the Band-Aids are always stored with whatever antibiotic cream you think you need. I don't usually use that stuff, but sometimes it makes sense to have it. And then if there's a related herbal remedy, I put that in there too. Rachel says, I have a 55-gallon drum of corn and rabbit feed, another for hay, and another for straw. Yep. That's a smart way to do it. And then you can get those 55-gallon drums with the sealing lids. Those are great. They keep everything nice and dry. If you're going to want, like Theraflu or any of those things, make sure you have that stuff before you need it. Actually approaching life this way all the time is really good, not just because when winter's coming, because when you need something and it's there, it's way better than when you need something and you have to go get the thing, especially if you live really far from the store like I do. So, and then infrastructure. Is there any infrastructure we need in place for the winter? And that's part of why the roof is off my Prepper Pantry, because this winter we're not going to be like, please don't freeze in the Prepper Pantry because my pipes are there. Like, this is going to be the first winter where I'm not stressed out about that. And every winter I am stressed out about that. But there's been other higher priority uses of my time and money than that roof and getting that so it's less freezy. So infrastructure things are easier to do right now than they will be in the middle of winter very often. And it's cool enough now that doing infrastructure work actually makes a lot of sense. It's why there's always this push between now and about Thanksgiving, I think, for people to get stuff done, because doing it in the harsh of the winter isn't the most fun outside, and doing it in the harsh of the summer is not super fun either. So you have like this window right now to get fencing up, to get better shelter for your animals, to get footpaths in, to get ready for that spring garden being all raised beds next year like I'm doing, to get ready for whatever, like insert thing here. Better storage of your firewood, whatever, get it done right now. It's perfect. It's perfect timing for it. Except for people who are in blazing hot Texas right now and like, no, it's not, Nicole. But choose the things you want to do and do those things. Like the things I want are that roof, and I want a better barn situation for the goats for the winter. Unless somebody would like to adopt my goats, then let me know and they can move out to your house and eat your brush instead of my brush. Because they're kind of done eating underbrush here. Like, they've served their purpose. I just really like them. So I don't want to just axe them. So I'm hoping somebody else wants a pet goat that can eat weeds at their house. Yeah. And then this one I didn't have on the list before, and this is why. It's energy. The reason I haven't had energy as its own call out is that I heat with wood. And in the winter, like, the energy that I most need is the heating energy if there's a problem. And because I heat with wood, like, I don't care if I have power, except for I kind of do. And like, the freezers are cold if the power goes out in the winter and it's cold. So I'm not worried about them. And we have systems in place for keeping freezers going intermittently in the form of a generator if that happens. Right now, if you have a generator and you haven't had it on in a while, this is your reminder to turn your generator on and see if the darn thing works and if you know how to start it, and to have, maybe check your gas stores for that. But what's up now is that the grid is less stable than it used to be. And I think a lot of us can take a really better look at what our energy plan is long term. Like, how are you taking care of your energy needs? Whether that be finding ways to use less of it or finding ways to compensate for things not working. I was listening to a podcast the other day, and I think it was Jack Spirko. Oh, it's Jack and John, the Tuesday Live I missed. They were talking about how you can buy old factories from the turn of last century that have their own onboard power generation stations. So they either have hydro or something else, some way that they were generating power, because utilities did not exist back then the way they do here now. Well, start thinking that way again. How are you making power work for you? Whether it be capturing some of the heat from your wood stove to make hot water, or it be have, like, do have that plan in place to have a generator that you can set up if power goes out. And then step back and say, how am I covering the needs? So I think mentally, the place we go when I talk about energy is I'm going to put solar panels in and batteries and handle everything. That's not what I mean. I mean, look at what are your energy needs. You need heat. You need to be able to cook. You need to have hot water, right? You want to have some lights. You want your internet to work. There's, whatever. Is there anything else I'm missing that's important? Not really. Maybe entertainment. I guess you probably want to run your TV if you want entertainment. Um, what do you need to run those? Electricity? No, you can heat water lots of different ways. Paul Wheaton was on about rocket mass heaters earlier, right? Like if you have a rocket mass heater that can heat your water, then you have hot water all the time on demand, in theory, if you have that thing pumping. You can use gas to heat water. You can use the sun to heat water, right? If you need to generate power for lights, sure, solar panels and batteries will work. What else will work? Hydro, wind. You can use your wood stove to generate steam to turn a thing to make power. So if you start thinking about how you cover your needs, then you get sort of further down the path. And one of the things that was most beneficial to me in getting to know Sean Mills from Hack My Homestead is that he thinks that way. And he's like, okay, so the least efficient way to heat water on, ever is with electricity. Because you got to generate the power to make the water hot. And if you just burn gas, it makes water hot. If you put a thing on top of your wood stove, it makes water hot. And if the sun hits the thing, it makes water hot. So if instead you're having the sun hit the panel to make the electricity to make the water hot, you're adding all these steps. Why not just use the solar, right? And well into the winter, you can use the sun to heat water, which is pretty interesting. I don't, because I don't want to maintain my system that way, but I do use it in the summer that way. Although we just took it off the roof, so now I don't have solar water power, like water heating going on right now, but it will be back. And it's actually really not hard to heat water with the sun. I mean, Paul said earlier, fire plus water equals pressure equals explosion. Absolutely true. My solar water heater has all of these, like, if it gets too hot, these valves. Those are pretty important to have. So you don't just go make it up, guys. Like, go learn about it if you're going to do something like that. Or buy an off-the-shelf one that's got the safety stuff built in. But energy is a weak point for two reasons. We're more dependent on energy than we've ever been before. And because we're more dependent on energy than we've ever been before, we have a hard time doing without it. So learn how to do without it. Learn what that feels like. Learn that you're not going to die. And if you are going to die, because it's the only way you get your heat, and you don't have a way to have heat, then you know what to cover first if you want to be ready for winter. And, it never ceases to amaze me in places in the Northeast United States when blizzards come through and you start hearing about people who had absolutely no other way to heat themselves except for electricity in a place where regularly, like every few years, storms come through, take out the electricity for weeks at the coldest time of year. And I'm like, so tell me again why you still don't have a big buddy propane heater at least, or something that can heat. I don't understand. It's like every time somebody survives another 2-week thing, and it's like people freeze to death in their homes. And it's so preventable, and it's not that expensive. Okay. How are your stores? We started with the Prepper Pantry statement, and like, I know how many jars I need this year. The only reason I know that is because I know how many jars I used last year and the year before. If you don't know, start somewhere, right? Start by documenting now. Start getting more stores up so that you're ready to go. And eventually you will know. You will know what you need for the winter. And if you don't know exactly now, that doesn't matter. Having something is better than having nothing, right? But really look at your stores, your animal food stores, your livestock stores, your human stores, all of that. Nice to have, right? Nice to have. And then you can also set up systems, speaking of that, where you're reproducing stuff. Like you can start your winter lettuce growing operation and grow sprouts and all sorts of stuff. You can have winter produce. Now is a great time to start planting your fall garden in Tennessee, which will stretch well into December usually. Some stuff goes over into winter and you have like mustard greens go for a really long time. Like people don't even want to harvest the mustard greens until they've been through frost. They say they don't taste good unless you do that. So uh, you can get a plan in place for that. And then you have something that's regenerative that you don't have to figure out how to refrigerate or dry or can. That's kind of nice. And it's time to think about getting ready for next spring. Yeah, I said it. I said those words. We're at late summer peak production, and what are you doing to those beds in your garden to get them ready for spring? Maybe nothing right now, but you're going to have to do something, and you're going to have to source the things to do that with if you want to put like wood chips or leaf mulch, or it's like time to start thinking about that. What are you going to do next spring? Like we have a big one. We're moving the garden, right? So we're already starting on moving the garden so that next spring I have a garden. And then you're going to hear me complain about it being a first year garden. That's okay though. But it's time to prepare for spring already. It's time to save the seeds that you're going to plant next year. I've got almost all my tomato. I've got one more tomato to save seeds from variety that I like to have. And then those are all ready. Like some of them are drying, some of them are dried, some of them are fermenting. But I'm doing the whole process so I have my seeds for tomatoes next year, which is part of how I keep costs down. I don't have to buy tomato seeds every year. I just put those back in the ground and they make fruit. And it's free. I swear it's free. Like after 17 years of infrastructure being done, it's free at this point. It takes time. That's what it takes. Yeah, those are all the things we do to get ready for winter. It's nothing crazy. I usually will do an audit of clothing, like do I have enough winter clothing and all of that sort of thing. But other than that, it's almost like it's become old hat because it's sort of like the same process every year. Like, how are we doing the water? Do we have everything in place to keep us and the livestock alive? Are there any plants that need something special? When are we doing the plant special things? And then, how are our stores looking? Are we ready to get through an illness? How are we handling energy? Do we have enough firewood? Actually, right now we have enough firewood. So that's nice. There have been other years you've heard me like, not sure I have enough firewood for the winter, and I'm freaking out about it, right? And then this year we're doing the winter lettuce again. So I'm going to get my lettuce going probably right after SRF. Because if I'm realistic with myself, getting it up and running before SRF is not something I want to dedicate time to because we got too much to do for Self-Reliance Festival. But other than that, we're ready to go. So Wendy Homestead says, my tiny wood stove does triple duty during winter, water, food, and heat. Exactly. Mine dries my clothes. I have a rack, like a European style clothes drying rack. I put it next to the wood stove, dries overnight. Like my clothes dry fastest in the winter here. This time of year, I'll put them out for 2 days and they're still kind of like tacky when I touch them. But by winter, that's great. I've got a big one this year. My propane company kind of screwed me over and I need to change propane companies. So I've got to get that rolling now because if I don't get it rolling now, then it's going to be my propane company will be continuing to screw me over because I'm stuck with them for the winter because making like everybody starts calling propane at once as well. So that's another one I got to get on. There's a lot of stuff I got to get on. Today, I got one thing done, and that's what I'm doing. It's like one thing gets done every day for winter. Between now and like the end of the month, we'll be good to go. We'll be good to go. So what are you guys doing for winter? Are you doing anything else besides what I've talked about? Let me know. You can do it by sending me an email, nicole@livingfreeintennessee.com. And hopefully what you're doing is working for you. And if not, hopefully you've got good relationships to get through anything else that comes up. With that, guys, if you like the show and want to support the work we're doing here, you can do it in 2 ways. 1, get your coffee at hollowroast.com. 2, consider becoming a member. Head over to livingfreeintennessee.com to find out more. With that, guys, go out and make it a great week.